Couple of things before the gospel today. One, I neglected to mention I will be gone during this coming week. So contact Jenny or Ina, church office, if there is anything that you need in particular. The second thing, on a slightly lighter note, except for her mother maybe, is that my stand-up, Caitlin. My favorite liturgist, assisting minister, the best one that we have in the whole congregation. Sorry to the rest of you.
Certainly better looking than me anyway, Tom.
Yes, right. This is her last Sunday.
No, she'll be here next week.
But she'll be here next week.
But Tom won't. But Tom won't. Yeah.
Last Sunday for you to...
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for rescuing me. And next week we'll say goodbye again. That'll be the third time. The Holy Gospel for this Sunday is found in the 14th chapter of Matthew. Please stand for the reading of the Gospel. Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead to the other side of the Sea of Galilee while he dismissed the crowds. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up the mountain by himself to pray. When evening came, he was there alone. But by this time, the boat, battered by the waves, was far from the land, for the wind was against them. And early in the morning, he came walking toward them on the sea. But when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified, saying, "It is a ghost." And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is I, do not be afraid." Peter answered him, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." So Peter got out of the boat, started walking on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me!" Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him, saying to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind ceased, and those in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." This is the gospel of our Lord.
Amen.
You may be seated. I just realized I forgot something. Ina, would you get my picture? You know the picture from the office?
You know which one you're talking about?
Too many things going on. Totally forgot. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. You might be noticing these days of summer that there is a lot packed into the gospel accounts. This morning's is a good example. Last week, we were told John the Baptist had been beheaded. Did you happen to notice that at the beginning of the gospel? Seemed like just a small detail, didn't it? Hey, let's get you to stand up here in the center aisle and show everybody. This is a painting that I got on public television.
Oh, nice.
When they have the auction, and it is done by a local artist whose name is Mr. Annabelle Garcia, lives on Midcrest, and it just really struck me. You can see it all right, Kurt?
Now I can. Yeah.
I'd like to call this sometimes surfing Jesus, but I think you get the point. Total contrast from the kind of fear we're talking about in the gospel today. And look at the look on his face that the artist has portrayed. I have not talked to the artist yet, but I really want to know what he was thinking about when he did that. Ina, thank you so much. You can stand there for the whole sermon. As I was saying, last week we were told John the Baptist had been beheaded. And it's kind of mentioned in Matthew's gospel like a little almost incidental thing, but it does say Jesus was going to go off by himself, if you recall last week, but the crowds followed him and he could not. And then what happened? Anybody here last week? Feeding of the 5,000, right? Feeding of the 5,000. So this time, Jesus succeeds in going off to a quiet place. It says, he tells his disciples, leave me, go to the other shore, but what quickly draws him back is another crisis. This time it's not so mild, like the hungry stomachs of 5,000 people. The results are surely just as dramatic. So I think the question's obvious, isn't it, this morning? What should our focus be? What should our focus be, do you think? If you, as I hope you have tried to, have taken time during this last week to look at this gospel, the question might be, what would you have preached about in this story of the disciples in a boat on a stormy sea and Jesus coming across the water? Can you see Jesus in the picture? Anybody? Would you say center by the boat? Or would you say off to the left? No. I'm not absolutely sure. It's a beautiful painting. I think it's a little bit foreshortened at the top because of the way it came on the slide. It's beautiful, isn't it? So, what would you have preached about? It might have been the meaning of a stormy sea. Into the midst of the chaos of the storm comes Jesus like a ghost. He calms the storm, replaces disorder and destruction with order, like God, we might think, ordering creation at the beginning as the Spirit of God passed over the chaos of the deep, the primordial deeps. Or, if you were preaching, you might instead relate to Peter. Good old Peter. Go ahead. Get out of the boat. You will see. Just stand on the water. Has anybody seen the movie, The Shack? Read the book? In the movie, the main character, who is deeply in grief, that is not an exaggeration, is invited to walk out on the water by Jesus. And of course, at first, very uncertain and wary. And then shortly it changes into a scene I probably shouldn't tell you if you haven't seen the movie. It's not the center of the whole thing, but it's certainly illustrative. The main character begins to run across the surface of the water, running after Jesus, laughing out loud. A million inferences could be drawn from all this, much of it about personal faith, but I, to no one's surprise, as I've mentioned, on this third Envisioning Sunday of the summer, I'd like to focus in here for just a very short moment on Bethany Church. And then after we've communed together, to go on our way into the social hall for that conversation about our present situation as a church. So here's at least one question I'd like to bring to this text. And the question is this: what would keep us from stepping out of the boat? What would keep Bethany Church from stepping out of the boat?
Fear of the unknown.
Fear
Of the unknown.
of the unknown.
We've always done it that way.
But let me hear some other comments from back here.
But we've always done it that way.
We've always done it that way.
Fear of not, doing something else.
Okay. Doing something else
Paralyzes
feels a
and
little,
faith empowers.
a little foreign. David?
Fear paralyzes and faith empowers.
Fear paralyzes and
Faith empowers.
faith empowers. I wish I'd thought of that. Wow. Fear abounds and faith empowers. Does everybody know about the architecture of this building? If you look up at the ceiling, what does it represent? I've learned over the years not everybody knows this. What'd you say? A boat. Does it look like a boat to you? Does it look like it's upside down? Okay. It's exactly what it's designed to look like. And sometimes people will draw analogies to the upside down boat and what's going on in a congregation at a particular time. Thanks for laughing, Kurt. But here's the question. Here we are in the boat. What would keep us from stepping out of the boat? Or to put it in a much more positive way, maybe the heart of church today is not how we do better what we do here, but how to step out there. Instead of asking what would keep us from stepping out of the boat, whatever this boat represents to you, our past, our locale, our building, our tradition, our name, our what, rather, what is it that Bethany now is and has that might be currency for something we have not even begun to envision? Just think about it. We're the last UCC congregation in San Antonio. Does that sound like we're going to be next? Or does that sound like, what's next? What's possible if we just step out of that boat? Amen?